Hello, everybody, and welcome to Feeling Seen, the podcast that talks about the movies that make us feel seen. Our co-host for today, as you will soon hear, has a very impressive resume. Liz Hannah is a writer for film and television who has two major shows on Hulu right now based on true stories of complicated women. The Dropout, a limited series which just aired its finale, and The Girl From Plainville, which just premiered last week. So, Amanda Seyfried, Charlize Theron, Elle Fanning, Meryl Streep, Liz Hannah's work has showcased some of the greatest blonde actors living today, and honestly, some just straight up legends. You look at her filmography and it's kind of like, how is this all hits, no skips? Like, this is kind of wild. But then after our conversation, I will have one quick thing to say before I go, as I always do, and this time it will be about one of my favorite little details concerning the movie Everything, Everywhere, All at Once. But right now, it's time to get to our conversation with Liz. I have a people's champion in the house with me today to co-host this episode with me. If you're a person on Twitter who likes film and television, you might be very familiar with my co-host today. If you are a person who likes film and television, you are likely familiar with my co-host today. She is a writer. She is a producer. She is responsible for writing The Post. She is a writer on the, I think, the highest praised scammer show of the year, The Dropout. She is the, I think it's co-showrunner of the new series, The Girl From Plainville. Written for Mindhunter, worked with the likes of David Fincher, Steven Spielberg. Liz Hannah, did I leave out anything top line that the people should know about you before we get started?
I don't think so. That was fantastic. I'm going to have you come for every introduction. It was wonderful.
I am a hype man by my nature.
That was phenomenal. Thank you so much.
What a concentration of good stuff. Like, what a run, Liz.
Thanks. It happens when you're very afraid you're never going to get a job again. So you and frankly have like a really unbelievable run of luck of people I've worked with. So it's been a good couple years.
Yeah, because I failed to even mention the beloved rom-com Longshot starring Charlize Theron and Seth Rogen.
Thank you. I love that movie. That movie, Dan Sterling, my co-writer, who it was his movie. He wrote it 10 years before I came on board. That was such a fun movie. I love rom-coms. We don't get enough rom-coms. Pro rom-coms.
You know, we're going to get to the subject matter at hand, but I think, you know, we've been talking about perhaps a rom-com renaissance for I feel like a number of years now, and I feel like Netflix streaming services have become a good place for there to be a slight resurgence, but I also think, like, our peer group, our sort of generational era, we were the people raised in that heyday of the 90s rom-com. And I feel like that really does bode well for a true rom-com renaissance at like an A-lister participation level, because the people who grew up on things like erotic thrillers and rom-coms in the 90s are the people who now have the pull and prestige to be like, I want to make this kind of movie.
Yeah, I mean, the Sandra Bullock, Channing Tatum movie is basically Romancing the Stone.
Yep.
I'm surprised that I haven't seen more of a discourse about that. A friend of mine, Jenny Connor, and I have for years been like, how do we make a new Romancing the Stone? Yeah. And we're like, do we just remake it? Like, it's such a good movie. If you haven't seen it, everybody should check it out. It's incredible. And then we saw the trailer for this movie and we were like, oh, that's how you do it. Cool. Got it. But I agree. I mean, I think, you know, the fun thing about Longshot was when I came onto that, we were, you know, Dan had written it 10 years earlier before he'd like been married and had kids. And so we were kind of updating it just to, you know, where all of us were in our lives. And we were trying to figure out how to do that. You know, rom-coms have really taken a hit in the last 20 years. They basically were unmakeable. And we kind of would sit around at lunch and talk about our spouses. I was engaged at the time. Seth's been married for 10, 12 years. Jonathan Levine, the director, has been married. And we were sitting around the table, like, talking about how lucky we were that our spouses were still married to us, or in my case, marrying me. And, like, I had just done The Post and had rolled right into this. I hadn't been home. I was forget planning a wedding. I was like, that's not a thing that's happening. My husband was working, same thing. And so it kind of became a love letter to our spouses, to, like, people that... And I think there was something interesting about that of of how people related to that. It kind of became about marrying your best friend rather than sort of, I think, how a lot of the newer rom-coms were very out there, you know, and very kind of fantastical. And this was just, I mean, given she does some ecstasy and then has a hostage negotiation, but, you know, that's only fantastical for some people. For some people, it's true.
For a small niche, relatable content.
Super relatable content.
Yeah, I will now bring us on to topic on the my very own show that I have completely submarined at the start of this, to say, Liz, what is the character in the movie that you have brought for us to discuss today on the Feeling Seen pod?
It is Marion Ravenwood in Raiders of the Lost Ark.
I was so excited when this was relayed over the transom. What a meaty character to get to talk about.
I love Marion. I've talked about Marion for years. Was for me, when I was growing up, it was the first time I ever saw a woman on screen who was sexy and a badass and funny and like made mistakes, and you kind of were like, ooh, that's a choice you made. You know, she wasn't
Marion
perfect.
Marion is messy.
She's messy. And I remember being like, that's what I want to be. But she was the first time I really saw, you know, in an action movie, somebody that seemed real, that was a woman. And it was really exciting. And so Team Marion all the way. I actually have a group chat that with two friends of mine that the group title is Team Marion. That's about Marion Ravenwood. So there you go.
Now, what is the age that you first encountered her at?
I was probably like 6 or 7.
Oh, wow. Okay.
My parents are really big film buffs. My mom in particular, a huge film buff. And so we just watched movies all the time. And she loved the Indiana Jones movies. And I think would have been, the first movie came out in 84. So I was probably, she showed it to me in the early 90s.
Gotcha,
so yeah,
okay.
because I think I saw Last Crusade in theaters, which was 89.
Okay.
So I would have watched them around then.
And, you know, the first thing we see of Marion is she's in like a shots contest with a man in
this
her
says
bar.
a lot about me. As a 6-year-old, I was like, her.
Yeah.
Yes, that one.
That's my icon. And, you know, like you said, like I've been having conversations about Marion for so long. How is that conversation developed over time? Because obviously when you're 6, you're maybe not clocking the like, she's fucking, she's fighting, she's all of these things.
Yeah.
But she's just really obviously cool. And she runs out to Jones at the end of the fight with the Nazis, and she's like, I'm your goddamn partner. Like he comes to her and he's like, I need this relic, and she's like, no, screw you, I don't have it either. And then they get in a fight with Nazis because the Nazis are looking for the same treasure, and then at the end of the fight she runs out, she's got it in her hand, she's like, you're not just taking this from me, you're not buying it off of me, we're in on this 50-50, me and you. And that is a pretty goddamn cool way to meet this character, who's gonna kind of be like the fun center of chaos throughout the rest of the thing.
There's this amazing book, because I'm like a humongous Indiana Jones nerd. My dog's name is Jones.
Yeah,
so
Jones
that.
the dog.
Jones the dog will not be making an appearance today. She's taking care of the baby. She's on babysitter duty. But there's this amazing book about the making of Raiders of the Lost Ark, and they talk about when Spielberg and Karen Allen were on set for that day for the drinking. And I think there was a different scene written that was Marion's introduction. And they decided that this would be the introduction scene, like on the day. There's some truth to that version of the story. And they were workshopping the scene, and there was I think there was a lot of lead up to it. And instead they cut like most of the scene, and it just became her going shot for shot and doing this drinking game. And so as a kid, like watching that, and then as a teenager and et cetera, not being like, as a human being not involved in the industry, I'm just like, it's such a badass. I love that she can stand her own, that she's like going shot for shot, but then it's all about like her own. She's a businesswoman.
She's a businesswoman.
Like, it's all about her small own business. Like it's a family owned business. And, you know, she's really just got to pay the bills. But then, as you said, like, Indy comes in and she holds her own and she goes toe to toe with him. And then as like a writer and a filmmaker, I just love the idea that they cut an entire introduction scene and we're just like, no, this is way better because it's so right. It's iconic. We all know it. And I just like, it's kind of ballsy to do that.
What don't you learn about her in that moment
Exactly.
that could have been, you would have learned in another scene?
She's a small business owner. She's very clever about her drinking. She knows when she's had too much, and she knows when the person she's drinking with has had too much, so she can go toe to toe with him. She does not accept any bullshit from an ex-boyfriend.
Nope.
Like, I'm all in.
Do you know what you did to me in my life?
I can only say I'm sorry so many times.
Well, say it again anyway.
Sorry.
Yeah, everybody's sorry. Abner was sorry for dragging me all over this earth looking for his little bits of junk. I'm sorry to still be stuck in this dive. Everybody's sorry for something.
I will say, questionable age difference.
Yes.
But we've all dated older men when we're younger, or older anybody when you're younger.
Right.
And, we make questionable choices.
Which is exactly how you end up in the situation where you're screaming at a man who comes to see you years later and you're like, I was in love with you. Like, that's the natural progress. And I love that because Raiders, obviously the story of Raiders is there is the Lost Ark of the Covenant, and Nazis wish to recover the Ark, I think to be a weapon in the service of the Fuhrer. And
yeah, it's basically a weapon of mass destruction.
yeah, it's a weapon of mass destruction. And Dr. Jones, being an archaeologist, A, wants to preserve it for history, and B, wants to keep it out of the hands of Nazis. And so him and his assorted gang of supporters, including Marion, end up going dukes up with the Nazis to keep this out of their hands. And adventure and wonderfulness carry forth.
Why don't you tell me where the piece is right now?
Listen, Mac. I don't know what kind of people you're used to dealing with. But nobody tells me what to do in my place.
When did you start writing stories? When did you start making characters of your own?
I don't remember. I was always doing it.
Okay.
I was always writing short stories. I was always telling stories. I have a really funny thing my dad gave me years ago. I think probably around the time I sold the Post, he had this framed thing of, I gave a speech about, or I prepared a speech to give to like my kindergarten class about dogs and what different kinds of dogs there were. And I typed it up, and in it, I also was like, please raise your hand if you have to go to the bathroom, because I knew that like people would be so enthralled by my speech that I would have to conduct, obviously.
Yes.
When people could leave and could not leave.
Absolutely.
But so I don't know. I remember like creative writing as a kid.
Mm-hmm.
I don't have a date, but I didn't really think about being a writer professionally until I was in my mid-20s, and I was already in another career. I was working as a development executive.
Right, you were
at
like a
production
producing
company.
track, right?
Yeah, I had gone to AFI for producing and really thought that's what I was going to do. I thought, I really loved producing, but it just wasn't fulfilling to me in a way. I really wanted to write. I had always thought like, wow, if I could do that, that would be amazing. I mean, I looked up to writers, and I just didn't think I was good enough to do it. And then I worked long enough in the industry that I was like, I think I should try this. I think if I don't try it, I'm gonna regret it.
Mm-hmm.
And so, yeah, so that was. And then I left my job, almost 10 years ago now. And here we are.
It's gone okay.
It's okay. It's okay.
It's gone all right.
Do not regret the choice. I will say the first 3 years where I left my job and I was like, this will happen fast. And then that did not. Mm-hmm. And I mean, in retrospect, obviously it happened very quickly and I was very fortunate. But those first 3 years, brutal. Mm-hmm. Yeah. Terrifying.
When you started, when you started doing this, was there a gap between, could be any character, but was there a gap between what you saw in female characters and what you wanted from female characters? And you were like, it's missing something, or it's missing me, or like I feel like I'm being pandered to. Like, was there a distance there that it was like, oh, fine, I'll fucking write it? Yeah,
I would say yes in what I was seeing, and I would say even yes in my own work.
Yeah,
when I first started writing professionally or trying to be a professional writer, I was just writing what I thought people wanted to read. I would like get information about what people were quote unquote buying and what people were interested in buying and things like that. And I would write to that. And I was not really listening to what I wanted to do. And so the post was actually the first thing I sold. And I wrote it on spec because I was like, if it doesn't sell, I didn't even think it was going to sell. I was like, I wanted an agent. And so if I didn't get an agent or it didn't get me to the next step, I was going to go back to producing exclusively or try to go back to producing exclusively. And part of it was really about Kay Graham and her being a character I hadn't seen. You know, I hadn't really seen a woman on screen who was so vulnerable in that way as a 55-year-old, you know, somebody who was so insecure and that really the story was almost a coming of age story of her finding her voice, of really, you know, we see coming of age stories of 18-year-olds. We don't see them of grown-ups. And I feel like I'm on the verge of a coming of age story again right now of my own. So, you know, I think that was really interesting to me. I felt like I hadn't seen a woman like that felt honestly insecure, honestly vulnerable. And that's all, you know, it's obviously a biopic. It's all Kay Graham in real life. And that was what attracted me to her, tell her story in the first place. So yes, going to your question, it absolutely was motivating for me that I hadn't seen somebody that felt like me, that felt like, you know, it's okay to be insecure. It's okay to be vulnerable. It's okay for all these things because they're real. And you just have to overcome them, you know, for lack of a better word, or learn to make them, you know, your superpower.
Now, I feel like it helps to have an access point of like this real figure, like a towering figure. Writing the post was not an easy thing. But like with that, you have a framework to be like, okay, I have a biography I can work from. I have accounts. I have this real person. You know, having done that, how was the process of like integrating that into your like original character creation? Or like, was it, you know, like you said, having to sort of learn or unlearn either the things we think are expected of us or the things that other people want that we should work towards, or perhaps even the limits we internalize on how to even write women as women compared to like what we've seen or what we were raised on? Like, was that a kind of learning process in and of itself or not? Totally.
I mean, I think Longshot's a really good reference point for that. You know, I can't take credit for creating that character. That was really a groupthink effort on Charlize's character. But something that I found really interesting about myself was I was sort of writing her sometimes in ways in early drafts that were more cliched or stereotypical in terms of her journey, in terms of where she was, of what her struggles were. And, you know, we would have long conversations sort of like, well, what is the challenge for her? And kind of the challenge is ultimately in the movie is like, the challenge is her, and the challenge is like, yeah, it's fucking hard to be a woman in the position of power, period. You don't actually need any other thing that's challenging. That is challenging in and of itself. Right. And we sort of don't talk about that enough, you know, that there's always, you know, I think we tried to put a family element in there at some point, and like, she, you know, like there's all this, you know, it's like the daddy issue or, you know, whatever it is. And it's like, no, actually, it's just hard enough to believe in yourself and to bet on yourself as a woman in a position of power. So that was definitely a situation where I was, you know, very much skewing in a direction that was learned, that was seen, you know, from how we represent women on screen, or how I'd seen women represented in television, or even real women represented in the media, of like, you know, how we interpret their struggles. And I was very much pushed, rightfully so, by all of the collaborators on that movie to be like, no, it's just, you know, it just fucking sucks to be the woman in power sometimes.
Well, yeah, there's that part where it's like, you know, you've been a great secretary of state.
Yeah.
Like, ooh, which one? Like, you know, the whole thing. And you know, to take it to a thing that I really like about Marion Ravenwood is that she's very much doing the thing of like, have the confidence of a mediocre white man. Like,
yes,
Marion,
not even like a strong white man.
No,
just a mediocre white man.
No, she's not. Yes. She's not a mastermind. She's not physically going to overpower like any, like, the men in the room who are trained killers and soldiers, but she has such an unshakable faith that she should, like, be in the middle of everything that's going down. Like, Indy in one scene is physically, like, it's one of the climactic fight scenes, he's physically throwing her back and forth, like, Marion, get out of here! And she just keeps running herself back into the middle of conflict, holding a pot or some metal thing, and is just...
I mean, she gets shoved into a laundry basket, let's be honest. It's, like, not a great look. She also brings the Nazi monkey into their lives.
She does.
Know, it's tough look. It's a tough look. But yeah, I love the idea that she has, like, the confidence of a mediocre white man, which is, like, truthfully, that's more confidence than I think I've ever had in my entire life.
It's a special kind of confidence.
It really is. So there is something very interesting about her in that way. But yeah, no, it's true. I mean, but that's the thing that I think is funny about her, and what I love about her is it's not like she's a superhero.
No.
You know, she doesn't... I mean, it's the thing I always love about Indiana Jones, too, is, like, he gets the shit kicked out of him, and he's like, ouch.
Yes. Hurts. Ow.
Well, God damn it, Indy, where doesn't it hurt?
Here.
I love that he's human, that, like, he has scars, and
Harrison
it's
Ford
not,
is truly
you know,
one of history's foremost actors in looking really fucking overwhelmed in the moment. And
looking overwhelmed, looking like, do I really have to do this again?
Yeah.
Truthfully. There's a great moment in The Last Crusade where they're like, let's go. And he's like, oh, like you could just feel him palpably be like, can we just take a break? This is so hard. And there's something amazing about Marion being a part of that and being, you know, even the sort of when they're dealing with the stakes and everything, like the blind kind of like, you're taking care of this, right?
Yeah.
Like there's something amazing about, like, I'm definitely not doing this. No, I saved myself from the very scary hostage situation I'm in. You're saving us from this. Thank you so much.
How the hell are we gonna get out of here?
I'm working on it.
Well, whatever you're doing, do it faster!
we adore her and we love her and we think of her as this ass-kicking figure because she is. And it is also true that, like, kind of nothing she plans goes right. Like you said, she ends up in a laundry basket. He thinks she's gotten blown up. She's having drinks in the tent with one of the, like, head Nazi guys. And he starts, like, she thinks she's really playing her feminine wiles on this one, and she's gonna seduce her way out of this tent. And he tells her to put on the white dress, and she thinks she's got him eating out of the palm of her hand.
Beautiful.
I would very much like to see you in it.
I'll bet you would.
And then she's just, like, doubled down, like, extra prisoner after this. She gets found out. Like, there's nothing slick about her. And I love that doesn't dampen her enthusiasm for anything she throws herself into for the entire movie.
It's accurate.
I want to be somebody who learns my lessons in life, but, like, also doesn't, like, take them to the letter. Like,
yeah,
we can have some creative problem solving here that I just haven't thought through yet.
Look, I jumped in feet first, and it didn't go great, but it's okay. We're gonna figure it out. I mean, she does get her money and her citizenship back in the end, so there's that, which is, so, you know, she did win ultimately. But yeah, it was. I think calling her messy is the best way to talk about it. It's like, I also like the idea that she's not really a damsel in distress, but she is, because she kind of gets herself out of it. But she's like, I'm really good. I mean, here's the thing. I'm all about subverting all gender stereotypes. Let's get rid of them and all of that. I also fully admit we started this by saying, like, I'm having technical issues, and that means that my husband's day has been bad. Yeah. Like, I'm also very comfortable being like, guess what? Not my job right now. Yeah. This is for someone else. And I got to admit, I love it about Marion that she's like, guess what, Brad? Not my job. Like, you're handling the snakes. That's just, you're going to deal with it.
We should be able to choose the gender roles we would like to dip in and out of.
Yes, I'm so down for it. Let's do it. And like, she chooses when she's like, I don't need you. Mm-hmm. And other times she's like, guess what? Tap in, my man. I'm tapping out. Thank you so much.
We are going to take a quick break, but we'll be back with more from Liz Hannah.
Hey, were you a reader as a kid? Like, maybe you read a lot of fantasy novels?
Or horse girl books. We know how it is.
But now you're an adult and you miss reading. You're so busy and you can't figure out how to get back into books.
We're Reading Glasses and we're here to help.
Yeah, we'll give you advice to figure out what books you love or learn to stop reading books you don't even like.
We're really big proponents of dumping that book.
Dump that book.
But most importantly, we'll help you fall back in love with reading. Reading Glasses, every Thursday on Maximum Fun.
Congratulations! You've won a ticket to attend an exclusive opportunity in a relaxing environment with two lovers.
Wow. Well, this sounds like a sort of proposition of sorts, but really it's an ad for our podcast. Wonderful. It's a show we do here on Maximum Fun where we talk about things that we like and things that we're into.
I'm Rachel McElroy, and you just heard Griffin McElroy, and we are excited for you to join us as we talk about movies and music and books.
Things like sneezing or the idea of rain.
Can you get news or information you can use?
Absolutely, you cannot, because we're here to talk to you about pumpernickel bread.
You can find new episodes on Wednesdays.
So catch the wave!
Welcome back to Feeling Seen. I'm your host, Jordan Crucchiola, and I'm talking with screenwriter Liz Hanna, who is the co-creator and co-showrunner of The Girl From Plainville, which stars Elle Fanning as Michelle Carter, the real-life teenager who was convicted of involuntary manslaughter in the death of her boyfriend under really crazy circumstances. So let's get back to that right now. As a creator and as somebody who makes really fucking high profile stuff, like, you know, with the girl from Plainville, with The Dropout, you have these characters based on real girls and women who came to national and media attention not as heroes, and it is your job to create a story around them that I wouldn't necessarily say takes a side about them, but makes them human and nuanced enough for us to invest over the course of the long haul of a series and not be like, that's a bitch, hate her, she's a bad. Like, we have to go on a trip with these people and be conflicted about our feelings about them, because that's drama, that's narrative. And so, you know, and in the year of 2020, when we're subverting things, but also should have the freedom to choose traditional, like, all about just sort of coming down to choice, that feels like that seems like a big evolving responsibility in your hands to be like, okay, I'm going to make a new heroine, but also I am going to make sure that this is a believable person, and I'm not going to girl boss it, but I'm going to give her agency. Like, not that any of these things are bad, but like, this is more of a juggling act than we've been allowed. It's a good juggling act. More of a juggling act than we've been allowed to do with non-male, and oftentimes non-straight characters, non-cis characters. What is that like, kind of writing the modern heroine, the modern anti-heroine?
Sure. I think anti-heroine is really interesting. I also think the thing that we've been taught about female characters, I think in particular, is that we have to like them, is that an audience has to like them.
Right.
And if the audience doesn't like them, then they're not going to buy in, which is absolute bullshit. Like, clearly we've seen a plethora of film and television projects be successful because we don't like the main character that's male. I think that what's interesting about Marion in this conversation is there is actually we don't worry about liking her. It does not feel like, to me, the filmmakers are worried about liking her.
Yeah.
She does some fairly unlikable things. She's pretty selfish constantly.
Yeah. She's giving indie shit the whole time.
And you're kind of on his side. You're like, all right, let's chill.
Yeah.
You know, so I think that is potentially like something that I subconsciously was very attracted to from her as a kid and growing up, and then have carried that into my work. As I really don't care if an audience likes my characters. It's just not, or the characters I'm writing. I just don't think that's something that you can get distracted by. And when talking about Elizabeth Holmes from The Dropout or Michelle Carter, it was actually interesting. It was almost easier because I knew going in that nobody was going to like them.
Right.
Like, I knew going in that an audience is not it's like, if an audience knows anything about Michelle Carter in particular, in terms of what the media story is that's out there about her, then I'm pretty sure that the majority of the audience is not going to like her. And so that is a little freeing in some ways, because you don't have to work at that. There's something. I'm not at all worried that an audience is going to do that. To me, it's much more about empathy. And I think the difference there is that I don't have to like Elizabeth Holmes, and I don't have to condone what she did, and I don't have to even really explain it in any way. But if I can empathize with her and see her as a human, and see the human choices she's made, and see, if not why she made the choices, like what made her tick a little bit, then I think I've done my job. And I think if an audience can put themselves in her shoes and see the complexity of her life a little bit more than what we thought there was, then there's more to crack there. And similarly with Michelle, I think Michelle, I think there's less out there in the public about Michelle than there ever has been about Elizabeth Holmes. And obviously Michelle has never spoken, and the Carter family has never given an interview. So there's so little of who, if there's anything of who she really is out there. The way that we've I'll just speak for myself. I won't speak for anybody else. The way I interpreted her was through how she dressed in court, how she behaved in court, what the media would say about her, how she's depicted as this Black Widow, to realize that I accepted that without any other side. There was no side, let alone somebody popping up and agreeing even with that knew her. There's nothing out there about her from her family or her perspective. And so that, I think, was really interesting. And again, this doesn't go to the case. It doesn't go to condoning or litigating what she did. It just goes to her as a human. And I thought that was an interesting challenge for Michelle, in that I knew people were going to come to the table with this show of really not liking Michelle, of potentially having even stronger feelings towards her, and having the challenge of just look at her as a human, just look at her choices as a human. And if not her choices, her just who she is and her life, and come with a little bit more empathy. And so, anyways, the very short version of the long-winded answer is, men don't seem to give a shit if people like them. So again, with the confidence of a mediocre white man, I don't care if people like the characters on screen. I do think ultimately there's still a desire to not villainize women in any way, or to complicate the idea of what even villainizing women means.
Right.
I think Elizabeth Holmes and Michelle Carter both were vilified in the media and have been, and right or wrong, we don't typically talk about men that way. And we definitely don't talk about their looks as much as both of those women have been talked about. And so I think that's, and, look at Monica Lewinsky, look at Britney Spears, look at all, there's an attraction to messiness, but I think we're still working on it.
A thing that I've been thinking about, like rewatching Raiders again for the purposes of this conversation, is there's a fascinating sort of pocket of action cinema history with like the action heroine, which like in a loose sense, like Marion Ravenwood, in the way that we could have an action heroine at that time, like I think falls under that category. And there is this really interesting like small groove. I almost consider it like this safe space where kind of like the best thing you could be in the biggest action movies for a while was like Tom Cruise's sidekick. Like, if you could be Tom Cruise's sidekick in his action movie as a woman, you were going to be not sexually objectified. You were going to do the coolest fucking things. You were going to have him, like, treat you with respect. You were going to be in probably one of the biggest movies that was going to come out that year. And there was something satisfying about watching Raiders of the Lost Ark and being, like, really feeling like I was seeing an action-supporting female character in a Steven Spielberg movie where I knew she was going to be safe. Like, even if she's not the front and center part of this story, I know that this filmmaker is going to take care of her and not be interested in exploiting her in ways that I would be nervous about in the hands of like a lot of other filmmakers where women were not necessarily a premium action draw at the time, if they weren't like, you know, lower, like kind of future video on demand, like Cynthia Rothrock, Michelle Yeoh doing work over in Hong Kong. But yeah, I think you were talking about collaborators earlier and the, like, you know, you're really good, but ending up with really good collaborators is a good fucking stroke of luck.
It's yeah, I mean, I think that's the biggest thing in my career that I can be thankful for, the people that I've worked with, because that's you don't go anywhere without it. I just want to touch upon what you're saying because I think it was really eloquent and something I hadn't thought about. It's not in that way, but there's something like as a woman, at least, or speaking for myself, watching a woman in an action movie or in anything like this, and there's just a constant fear of like, oh God, what's going to happen to them? Or like, oh, what's their traumatic backstory that's going to influence this?
Yes.
And that the backstory of trauma is something that I am like very knee-jerk no to in terms of not every woman. Look, like I think every woman has some trauma in her life because we're women and it's just traumatic in general. But I don't know that I need to see on screen constantly the trauma that women have been subjected to and the violence that women have been subjected to like overcome that. I don't know that you have to be powerful as a woman or see a powerful woman. Here's what I'll say. I don't know that you have to represent powerful women on screen as them having overcome something. Right. I think you can just have a powerful woman on screen because you don't have to. Indiana Jones did not have to overcome something to be Indiana Jones. He just is Indiana Jones.
Yeah.
and I think seeing that, you know, Marion was not somebody who had trauma. There's not something discussed of this horrific thing. You know, her dad's an asshole and Indy dated her and like he's a terrible ex-boyfriend.
And he was a fuckboy. Yeah.
And by the way, Indy, get it. Yeah. But like, I'm not gonna lie.
He's got clearance.
It's fine. It's fine. No judgment. But the idea that we don't have to delve into, and what made me think about it is I'm like a humongous fan of the Mission Impossible McQuarrie movies.
Oh, yeah.
Like preach at the altar. And Rebecca Ferguson, who plays Ilsa Faust. Like I could talk about Ilsa Faust for hours. And she for me is sort of like the modern Marion Ravenwood. Like she has kind of become that. But we know very, very little about her.
Yeah.
And it's totally fine. Like I watched Rogue Nation and I was like, fuck yeah, where's her movie?
Yeah.
I'm in. Why did it take this long to figure this out? And she sort of has become like the co-lead of these movies now because she's just so attractive as a character.
Oh God.
So I'm all in on this conversation and think it's really important about in action films, in high budget movies, we can have strong women and not have conversations about what they overcame to be strong.
Right.
They are strong. We are guess what? If you're a woman, you are strong because it's really fucking hard to be a woman. Yeah. So just period.
Yeah.
So we don't have to like
now,
go into it.
And now is better than before, I think.
Exactly.
In a lot of ways.
Yes.
So however difficult it is now, and I say from the privileged position of like my whiteness and my middle classness, like whatever challenges are evident in my life, turn the clock back any time before. And it's oh fuck, it's worse now?
Yeah. 100%. I mean, again, I say this from total privilege of a white cis woman, and that it's really hard. And so I think it's, and you look at any other perspective and it's harder exponentially. So I don't know that, like, I live that. Everybody lives that.
Yeah.
I don't need to spend $24 to go watch an action movie and like live it again. Or sit in fear of what's going to happen. I just think that what you said is actually really profound, and it's sort of sticking with me. Of like, I had never considered how safe it makes me feel to watch a female character handled where I'm not worried about what's going to happen to them.
Isn't that a phenomenal thing when you realize that you had been tensing up your shoulders and then you only realize that you had been because you stopped, and then you're like, oh, wow, I wasn't okay before.
And to not do that, I mean, and by the way, this is also a conversation of having women behind the camera, because I generally feel much better when I know that there is a woman behind the camera telling a story of a woman, because I'm not super worried about, you know, the safety of those characters. So anyways, I thought that was a really important point you brought up. I think that's really smart.
Thank you. I appreciate that. And for just my own selfish desire as a fan, what is the collaborative magic between you and Elle Fanning? You're back for a repeat with Girl from Plainville. You'd previously written, I believe, it was All the Bright Places with her and Justice Smith. What is that collaborative? What is that synergy with one of my favorite actresses?
Well, she's one of my favorite actresses, so that's a good synergy to start with.
Yes. Great start.
I'm a big fan. Great start is from there. I've known Elle and Dakota for a while. We have the same manager, and I've known Dakota for longer. And when Bright Places came about, it was the first time I met Elle. And she'd never really played a teenager on screen.
Yeah.
Like, she's, you know, for somebody who's been around for as long as she has, she actually had never played a sort of a normal high school student.
Right, yeah. Teen girl who's been eaten by other women, done that. But, like, being in high school? No.
Yeah. Catherine the Great, been there, done that. You know, it's fine. But so, you know, and All the Bright Places was for a number of reasons, and actually very similar to Girl from Plainville, dealt with conversations about mental health and suicide and grief. And those are things that thematically I'm very interested in exploring. And so on that side, I was really fascinated by that. And there were conversations in that Elle and I had that I thought we had a real chance at sort of diving into a character in a way that was different. But the thing for me about leaning into that movie and then to jumping onto Plainville with her was that she's not afraid. She's completely fearless. And so there are choices that we made in Plainville that we just wouldn't have made if it wasn't Elle.
Right, yeah.
Because she both pushed us to go darker or weirder or deeper. And at the same time, I felt comfortable doing that because she was doing it. And I knew that she could do it because she's Elle. And having said that, like, I also, being a very big part of the fan club, I'm excited for people to see this because I think she's so good and so consistently good that we're like, well, because she's Elle, she's good. And it's almost become backlash at this point, you know, where it's like, it's people just expect her to be good. And I don't know that then there's a full appreciation for like how difficult it is or how hard she works. Because you're just like, it's so easy for her it seems so easy for her. And knowing that it's not, and particularly I think with this role and this character, she really, I mean, there's a scene at the end of the pilot that you guys can all watch at 9:00 tonight, apparently, that is one of the hardest things I've ever asked an actor to do, if not the hardest thing I've ever asked an actor to do. And Elle spent, I think it was about 4 or 5 weeks after we wrapped shooting every day practicing it. And it's really impressive. And so I'm just really excited for that. But the reason I keep coming back is because if Elle, you know, wants to work with you and you do it, you don't say no.
If Elle Fanning asked me to drive her car for her, I'd do it. I mean, fuck. Like, yeah. This leads me to the thing I wanted to, I think, ask you toward the last is, in that spirit of collaborators, and then in that spirit of being able to, through the right collaborators, push your own limits. Like, I wouldn't have done this if I didn't have this specific actress working with me because I knew she could do it and I knew that it was safe for me to do it. How, like, through your successes and obviously through, like, you know, the failures and things that didn't happen that nobody knows about because they didn't go anywhere, where do you see yourself wanting to push your own bar, continuing to go forward, to sort of dare us as viewers to consider more challenging as normal. Like where to make like space for like the Marion Ravenwoods of for Gen Z who have the luxury perhaps of taking for granted the Marion Ravenwoods of the world. Like how do you want to scare yourself next with like a thing you're going to do?
I mean, the truthful answer is that I want to do Marion. I want to write and direct a movie that is the, you know, love letter to that character. That's I mean, it's really truthfully, I've never written an action movie.
I want everyone to write action movies. I want everyone to write action movies and horror movies. Please do this for us, Liz.
Everyone should write action movies. It's like I've written action sequences, and it's always so fun. And so yeah, I mean, it's truthfully, I don't think that there has been a lead action heroine that I have seen that feels like something that is the most maybe matured version of Marion in 2022. Still keep her messy.
Yes.
Gotta keep her messy. But and that's not a knock on the female heroines that we've seen. I mean, I think, like, again, speaking about Ilsa Faust, like, I fucking love Ilsa Faust. Give her own movie. So basically, that's what I'd like to do. So that's honestly my next goal is feature wise. I'd like to do that. That for me is super scary in terms of a writer. I haven't written an action movie before. I've written action sequences. So having like big set pieces in a script that you know you're writing to is really exciting and something I'm really excited to challenge myself with. And then as a director, you know, I haven't directed something that big before. And so that's something that I'm looking forward to try and convince people to give me money for.
Yeah. Thank you so much for your time, Liz. And what is the duration of Girl from Plainville? What is the run that people are in for with this show that is now out?
So we premiere the first 3 episodes March 29th, and then we go weekly after that. It's 8 episodes. So in my sleep-deprived brain, I can't tell you when we end,
so
but it's like the end of April.
A solid month and a half. Solid month and a half. And then, so first week of April is Dropout finale. Whoa, yeah.
And it's on Hulu, so you also can watch it forever because it's always there.
Yes. Catch any of Liz Hannah's stuff that you can, you guys, on all the forums that you can find it. Liz, thank you so much for talking to me today, and I am so glad we finally got to close the loop on the conversation I've been intending to have with you for years.
Thank you for having me. This was great.
Thank you again to Liz Hannah. This was a real bucket list day for me, you guys. So congratulations to you for being able to join in on that conversation. In addition to checking out those shows, if you are a lover of fun movie conversations, you should definitely follow Liz on Twitter, where she is at It's Liz Hannah. Screenwriter Twitter can be a tumultuous place, but Liz Hannah is a bright spot among it essentially all the time. So you can find that linked in our show notes. But right now, I have got my customary one quick thing before I go. And that today is concerning the movie opening ever wider and ever wider in each passing week. Everything, Everywhere, All at Once, which is written and directed by the duo Daniels. It stars Michelle Yeoh as an unsettled woman, a wife and a mother and a small business owner of a laundromat, at a real point of struggle in her life. They are being leaned on by the IRS for tax issues. She and her husband, played by magnificently by Ke Huy Quan, have not really been truly connected to one another in a long time, and she just doesn't understand her daughter Joy, played magnetically by Stephanie Hsu. And there's so much audacity and boldness and vibrance to this movie. But the little tiny thing that really isn't so tiny in the end that I just wanted to shout out was, to me, what I considered the surprising subplot of queer acceptance in this movie. We're coming to a place now where there are more stories of queerness readily available for people to consume. But historically, stories of queerness tend to fall into two categories. It's either a coming out story or a story of bashing and trauma, or it is a combination of those two things. That is a lot of gay storylines that we get in cinema, particularly when they are movies not aligned with, you know, the new queer cinema movement or rebellious queer film, you know, upstart queer auteurs. The Daniels are a bold and brave pair, and there is so much wild and over the top happening in this movie, but the tenderness and the simplicity and really the elegance of the queerness of the character of Joy, again, played by Stephanie Hsu, is just so lovely. Like, this is a family that is at odds with each other in so many ways. And there is this vast chasm between mother and daughter. And the queerness is not leveraged as this traumatic split between the two of them. It is simply two people who are too alike and too close to one another, but living very different lives, who grew up in very different ways, just not understanding each other. It's a story of understanding and a story of empathy. And within that, we get to have just this nice, meaningful, authentic feeling detail that Joy is gay. And that isn't the fucking biggest problem she has between her and her mom. It is just another area where her mom simply can't relate to her, but that's just one of a million ways that her mom simply can't relate to her. And it's nice. It's really beautiful, actually, for queerness to exist on screen as just a matter-of-fact part of a character's life that doesn't have to be the driving, defining force of who they are and why people don't like them or why people fight with them in a movie. It can just be true that that is the way a character is, and it's nice. You know, perhaps the youths find this a bit common. Maybe Gen Z out there is like, so fucking what? There's gays all over the place now. I don't know what the big deal is. But I'm old enough to know, for one, when we couldn't just find gay characters living their lives on screen for many reasons that had nothing to do with their sexuality. And while it is a meaningful, obviously, detail about Joy, it is not the cataclysmic, world-shattering conflict-generating detail for Joy, who is at the center of the sort of epic interdimensional maelstrom that we are treated to within everything, everywhere, all at once. So that's just a really nice thing. And I really appreciate that that's a part of the story. And I will really continue to appreciate seeing queerness woven into the fabric of narrative works in ways similar to this. So that's really nice. So that is my one quick thing before I go. And that's our show. You can follow us on Twitter at FeelingSeenPod or join our Facebook group at www.facebook.com/groups/FeelingSeenPod. You can also send us an email at feelingseen@MaximumFun.org. If you want to follow me, I'm Jor Crew on Twitter. Our theme music is by Andrew Epen. This show is produced by Marissa Flaxbart. Our senior producers are Kevin Ferguson and Laura Swisher, and this is a production of Maximum Fun.
MaximumFun.org.
Comedy and culture.
Artist owned. Audience supported.